Hello everyone, my name is Sébastien Dupuis. I'm a professional pianist and piano teacher living in Zurich, and I restored this piano there, which is a Erard of 1876, 2 meter 45 long. And I have this Steinway C there that I actually learned to regulate and tune. The topic of today will be about Chopin pianos, because I know a lot about Liszt pianos, I know a little bit about Chopin pianos, and I made these videos that got a lot of controversy about the key width of pianos in Chopin and Liszt time. Now, Chopin died earlier, Liszt lived a bit longer, so Liszt had later pianos than Chopin had. So I came across, did some research on ChatGPT, asking for some links and some studies and some, if people measure this stuff. I actually did the thing. I measured the Erard there and the Steinway. They are the same key size, right? Exactly the same. I asked people that I knew that had different pianos, because this piano is for 76, so that's not 1876. Yeah, so this Chopin was died a long time ago. Liszt played on a piano like this, by the way, in Rome. So I asked people who had pianos, Pleyel and Erard, from the years 40s and the years 30s. They sent me measurement. They were exactly the same as this Erard, so there I didn't see any difference. I didn't manage to measure the piano that's in Warsaw. I asked a student to do when she was there, but she was not allowed to do. And I played myself on different Erard and Pleyel in my career, and so I have some experience with this kind of pianos. Now, I came across an article, and I will put the link in the description if you want to read completely, of a pianist who actually had access to a database and did some measurement himself. So in the measurements we have from pianos from 1780, so Beethoven time, to beginning of Chopin Liszt, when they were like teens in 1820, let's say, and then 1840, 50 and later. The first thing that we can say is measurements changed with more or less 3 millimeters. So they measure an octave all the time, and they have difference of, I think, up to 6 millimeters sometimes. But they also measure graph pianos, which are different Broadway pianos. I will put actually the measurements we found here. So my first conclusion is, like, by the way, I didn't find any Pleyel and Erard pianos, not so many of course, that has different measurements as a Steinway. So the octave is the same as the modern Steinway. But apparently there are Erard and Pleyel, especially Pleyel, that are slightly narrow. Now, that's the point, that will be the whole point of the video. How much difference is there, and how much was this influence Chopin playing? Now, about Chopin's hands first. So there is this letter of a student of Chopin. Now, there has to be careful with letters also, because letters are not measurements, right? It's impressions of students of Chopin. And like, I have students too, and students misunderstand a lot of stuff, right? They're not professionals. So I would be cautious with this, right? But one of the students of Chopin is saying that Chopin had a pianino in his apartment, and pianinos are small pianos. They have narrower keys, and Chopin played on this one sometimes. Chopin also had mostly grand pianos, so concert pianos of that time, so the big ones. And these pianos has different measurements. They differ from 3 millimeters sometimes. That's the first thing. Now, this letter says Chopin was playing on the small one, and the student was playing on the big one to show some stuff. Now, what I'm thinking is, across all the pianos Chopin owned, and Chopin owned many pianos, like he changed very often Pleyel, all the measurements we have, they all change from the widest to the narrowest, right? And some are a bit wider than an Erard or the same, and some are a bit narrower than an Erard or the same, right? So he had actually different pianos. So he didn't compose all his life on one piano. And what's totally wrong, people say online that he got a piano built for him. That's not true. I researched this. I didn't find anything about this. He had this piano that has narrow keys, but then that's like a special piano that he bought, right? Now, did he buy it to have the narrow keys? That's another question. So then there's the example of Scherzo number 3 that Chopin writes. More or less this. I didn't play it for a long time. So the chord here, we have a 10th here. We have D sharp, F sharp with notes in between, and we have a D sharp here that actually you just take with your thumb. That's actually something Chopin wrote and not invented, but he for sure like knew this stuff, right? And there the students is saying Chopin could not possibly take this chord. But I know people with smaller hands that I have, and I don't have especially big hands, and they can play it too. Like, it's not one of the difficult things. Like, they can play it having this. You have this, by the way, in this. At some point, you have this chord, right? Same distance here, a tenth. I have many students with small hands. Some women with really tiny hands don't manage this one, but most of people manage doing this one, a tenth with this thumb. And then there is another thing. People who are not professional don't have trained hands, because if you have a trained hand like Chopin, even if your hand is slightly smaller than average, let's say, like maybe Chopin had, that's another topic too, they are trained, so they have a big distance, and you even can keep training this. If I'm not practicing big intervals every day, but if I'm practicing it, I know I can extend my reach by some millimeter in some weeks, right? So Chopin was trained. I'm quite sure, almost sure he could do a tenth. The reason I'm thinking is this is, well, he writes a lot of tenths in his pieces, and I think he would have avoided them if this was really a problem for him. But I think it was a problem. And then even if you are a trained pianist, if you cannot reach the tenth, like let's say Maria Jo Pires, who has a small hand, and maybe Ashkenazi has quite small hand too, well, they play Rachmaninoff stuff, they play Chopin stuff, and they manage perfectly, there is no problem. So if you are a professional pianist like Chopin, Ashkenazi, people like this, they are trained pianists, they have a stretched hand, right? They have an athletic hand, so they can do this stuff. And if they can't, they can play it in a way that you don't hear they can't, right? So they do very cool stuff like this or something like this, so you don't notice so much, right? So I don't think that's a valid argument. Then another argument is this first etude. Chopin probably composed this on a piano, like a graph piano that had slightly narrower keys, like again, like 3mm difference on an octave. Well, there again, this etude, I know a lot of people with small hands who can play these etudes much better than people with big hands and are not trained. So this etude is not, nobody asks you to have the chords in at once, right? You jump from one note to the other, and that's the whole technique you learn in such an etude. So I don't think that's also an argument showing that Chopin had pianos with narrower keys, right? So these are a bit misconceptions. Again, like Chopin probably had pianos with slightly narrower keys, but I think 3mm is not a relevant distance, because by the way, pianos of today's has sometimes 1mm difference for an octave. So nobody noticed this difference. I mean, you notice, but it doesn't make you not be able to play a piece or be able to play it, right? I can play the first etude of Chopin, and I can play it on any piano. And by the way, the biggest difference you have on pianos most of the time is the weight of the keys, the acoustic of the whole, the pedal is a bit different, the response is different, the speed, the repetition, there are so many differences on pianos. As a pianist, you are trained to react to this difference and to deal with it without too many problems. So I can play on a piano with less key depth, like the era. There are actually other differences on the pianos that are much more important than the key width. There's, for example, the depth of the key. The key goes normally around 8mm instead of 10. That's something you can adapt in seconds. Same for the width, right? And same for the way the keys are rounded on the side. I had just 2 days ago, I had 2 Bechstein pianos. One has really rounded side of the notes, and the other one has really sharp edges like the Steinway. That's also a different feeling, but you still can play, right? And yeah, I don't think, because the big argument of people online who actually didn't read any article, who saw some stuff quickly and make quick conclusions and then keep repeating this conclusion to other people, and then everyone knows and actually nobody checked anything, which I'm a bit against, of course. So what people say is like, on a Chopin piano, an octave feels like a seventh today, and that's for sure that's wrong, because 3mm, a key is 1.4mm. So even if you have a difference of 5mm, let's say, on an octave, there are like 5 times 5mm in a key. So if you take one away, it doesn't make a key go away, right? It's like a slightly little part of the key less wide. So if you can play in an octave with 16.5mm, you can play it. The difference is not so big when it's just 16mm, right? 160mm, sorry. So yeah, like again, this difference exists. I didn't see any, but apparently this exists. I'm still actually waiting for actually a real measurement, someone sending me like this on a player with where I can see that it's actually 160 millimeter and not 165 like the era or 163. Um, didn't see any, right? People talk about impressions and they have like measurements they have from somewhere else, but I never saw anyone telling me that. Again, I'm curious. I want to see this. I didn't see it till now, right? Now, the other thing is sometimes the argument of arpeggios. Chopin, if a chord is too big, he would write it arpeggio. If it's really too big, he would, yeah. But then if it's something you almost can have like the scherzo there, like a tenth, and some people might not have it. If he would not be able to play it, he would write it arpeggio, not necessarily actually, because an arpeggio chord has a bit of different musical meaning than a chord you just push, right, at once. And if you cannot play a chord at once, you try to be as close as possible by a very fast jump, right? As fast as possible, so you almost don't hear that it's not together. And in the speed of pieces, most of the time you don't hear it. So that's again also not really an argument of Chopin not being able to play tenths. Another thing is I researched this a bit about Chopin hands. Now it's difficult to know because we have a copy of Chopin hands, and who knows how accurate is the copy? We will never know. But there's a copy of Chopin hands, and probably it's accurate. And I had a guy on Instagram, I saw he posted a picture, so a trained pianist, so it was the same kind of trained hand he can stretch, who put his hand next to the hand of Chopin, and he realized he has exactly the same size of hand. And I asked this pianist, so what can you reach? And this pianist said, like me actually, he can reach CE easily and then CF if he stretch a bit. So let's say Chopin had slightly smaller hand, he still could reach a 10 CE, right? I'm quite sure he could reach CE, maybe with some difficulties, but then again, he's a trained pianist. It doesn't create a problem when you're a trained pianist. So yeah, my whole point was there, because I just want to fight again these shortcuts people do online saying pianos in Chopin times had narrow keys, so an octave for him was a seventh for us. So that's why Chopin is difficult. That's why I cannot play Chopin, because pianos are too big today. That's totally wrong, right? That's like 100% wrong. What's maybe true, and I'm still waiting for confirmation, is that Chopin had sometimes, not always, players with slightly narrower keys. And again, I insist on slightly 3 millimeters, which actually don't make a big difference enough to really have a problem with tens and with octaves and stuff like this. So I think it's just a lazy, weak argument that people like to have. Instead of practicing, they prefer to say the pianos have too big keys, and that's why they cannot play Chopin or Liszt. Same story with Liszt. By the way, Liszt had mostly Erard, and Erard on average had slightly wider keys. So that's maybe also the reason why this one has exactly the same key width as the Steinway. But by the way, Chopin played on Erard too concerts and on other pianos too, and he didn't suddenly play badly because he played on the Erard, right? So he played, we don't have a record of Chopin having a horrible concert because he played on an Erard and could not play his pieces because it's full of tenths and his first etude was too difficult. No. So yeah, that's just what I want to emphasize a bit. And again, like there are some research online. Don't just read forums, don't just read what other people say. I think let's be a bit scientific there, and that's the thing that matters, right? If you have this on the keys and you can see the distance and how do you feel. And again, like feelings, impressions of people are not so valid either, because I know there's videos of pianists, famous pianists playing on the Pleyel of Chopin time and saying the keys are narrow. Maybe they are, maybe they are not. It's an impression. I have this piano here, Erard, and a lot of students who play on this piano tells me the first impression they have is, oh, the keys are a bit narrow. And I'm always telling them, no, they're not. And I have to prove it. I come with this and I show them they're not. But because the depth is a bit less, because the length is a bit different, because the weight feels a bit different, they have the feeling the keys are narrow. And the piano in itself is a bit narrow. There's less notes on the side, so it feels narrow. So feelings are a bit objective and people has feelings. And if you press an octave and it's not on the piano like you're used to play, then you have the feeling, oh, the octave is a bit narrow, what's the problem? Yeah, I think impressions are not really what matters in this case. Measurements are stuff that matters. So actually I'm welcoming everyone who has, because I'm waiting for this, I'm searching for it, everyone that has access to a player with narrower keys, not a piano, not a pianino, that's a different piano. I want to know the pianos Chopin had most of time, which was the grand pianos. He had many different ones. A grand piano of Chopin time Pleyel with narrower keys, I want to have the measurement. It will be probably 160 instead of 165, but I want to see it once. I never saw any measurement of this. So if you have one, please send it on the comments. Just join a picture or send me by email. My email is in my biography. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope I helped debugging some social media stuff people just repeat without checking. I did the work of checking. I have a piano there. I would recommend everyone to do this before telling stories on social media, because then it becomes like the Arabic telephone, where you start a sentence and at the end, after 10 repetitions, the sentence is completely different, which is happening on social media. Thank you for watching. See you next video.